All right, awesome. Well, today what we're going to do is just try to step back from all these prophets that we've looked at and try to wrap our heads around everything. Okay? Try to take it over just a big picture of everything. So before we hop into the test review, just to kind of get that perspective, if we were to say break down this history that we've looked at into 3 sections, how could we maybe do that? What would you say are 3 chunks that we could break it down into?
The exile, and return.
Okay, yeah.
What?
Everybody. I heard it over here.
Pre-exile,
Yeah.
Exile and return.
Oh, are we breaking down the prophets or the whole Hebrew Bible?
The prophet section,
Oh,
prophetic
prophets,
section, right?
got that.
And I think there's something about this, the stuff they're using that's making it not show up well. Right? So these are the 3 main sections that we're looking at, right? The 3 big time periods. And the prophets kind of help, one of the major things that the prophets do is they help the nation of Israel kind of deal with their identity through these times, right? Now the pre-exile we can break up into 2 different exiles, right?
Oh, yes.
We have the north, which was who?
The Yankees.
Judah taking over.
Well, who exiled the
Babylon.
Assyria?
Oh, Assyria. Yeah, Babylon is over.
Yeah. The Assyria exiled the northern kingdom into exile, and who sent the south into exile?
Babylon.
Good. Lovely. Okay. So now if we're looking at the prophets that we've looked at, right? Just don't worry about all the prophets that we haven't talked about, but just the ones that you guys have done projects on. This northern Assyrian crisis, who prophesied in the north about the Assyrians? Who prophesied in the north about the Assyrian crisis?
No one, Jeremiah. Ezekiel.
No.
I need my list. I love my book.
Who prophesied in the north, in the northern kingdom, about the Assyrian threat? The Assyrians are kind of just now coming into power, just not becoming a threat. And there's a couple prophets we looked at, one in particular, who prophesied against it.
No.
Close. It's the closest.
Yeah.
What's that?
I was on Saturday as well. I can't remember.
Amos and Hosea, right? We spent a lot of time on Amos. We kind of like checked in with Hosea real quick. But Amos was the guy that we really looked at. Right? Remember that was the presentation that I did for you guys. Apparently you remember it really well.
It's a lot to take in.
I'm just saying. I'm just picking on you guys. I'm picking. Now, who prophesied in the south about the Assyrians?
Everybody else.
Isaiah.
No, I'm just
Good. Isaiah. And remember we talked about how Isaiah was broken up into potentially 3 books? Right? So this is first Isaiah. Another way that gets referred to is Isaiah of Jerusalem.
And
Right.
he prophesies in the
He prophesies in the south about the
About
Assyrian
Assyria.
threat. Now, who prophesies concerning the Babylonian threat?
Jeremiah.
That was Jeremiah. Right? Jeremiah is the one who prophesied about the Babylonian threat. Now, when we looked at the prophets in exile, we focused in on one. Who was that? Bingo. Sent out with the first wave of exiles because he was in the priestly class. His priestly in the upper class got exiled first. Good. And then the post-exilic period, which 2 prophets did we look at? Good. Nehemiah and Haggai. Right.
Okay, wait, back up for a second. So, Isaiah prophesied from the south about the north.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Amos and Hosea, northern prophets, Isaiah is in the south. Right? And you can remember that because we call him Isaiah of Jerusalem. Jerusalem's in the south.
Jeremiah.
Okay. He was from the south.
Jeremiah's prophesying in about the Babylonian threat, so he's going to be in the south. The only people we really need to think of with the north are Amos and Hosea.
Okay.
Right? Because after they prophesy, the north falls. Right? And so everybody else is going to be from the south. Ezekiel's from the south. Nehemiah and Haggai are from the south as well. Okay? So this gives us kind of an overall picture. Right? We've got these 3 major periods, and we've got these 4 major, yeah, I mean, I would say, like, you could break it up into 4 by saying the Assyrian threat, the Babylonian threat, the exile and post-exile. So depending on how you want to parse that out, it's 3 or 4 time periods, right? Okay, so let's kind of go through this review. Some of this, I'm going to actually, does everybody have this down so I can erase it? Cool. Because some of this will hit right away in this review. Okay. So, first question. Really basic. The Hebrew term for prophet, Navi, means what? What did we say that term meant?
It was somebody. Isn't that the one that hears from God? It's the other one.
It's close. Navi. Remember, Navi means something. What a Navi is. We said it wasn't. Does anybody remember what we said this wasn't? Okay, there we go.
The
call.
future. The future.
So it wasn't that, right?
It wasn't the future.
Right. It wasn't just about the future, right? Remember, because why are prophets not focused on the future? Or in what ways do they talk about the future?
They're more concerned
To
with
talk
justice.
about people, living people.
Right. Justice in the present.
Right.
Right. Good. So yeah. So Navi just means, one who is called or one who announces. Right. This is right in your notes. Right. One who is called, one who announces is taken from a Hebrew verb that means to call or announce. And so we can kind of see it either way, right? One who announces, one who calls, or we can have it like kind of reflective, one who is called.
It's also a tribe of blue aliens.
It's also a tribe of blue aliens.
Us.
If you've watched Avatar.
Great movie.
How does the prophetic witness, this is going to kind of make you think a little bit, we have mentioned this explicitly, how does the prophetic witness differ from the Deuteronomic history in its identification of Israel's sin? Right? The Deuteronomistic period calls out one thing as sin, and the prophets tend to call out something else as Israel's primary sin. What's the difference?
The prophets call out
Who calls out idolatry?
the old one, Deuteronomy.
Primarily.
I mean,
Right.
yes.
And the prophets call out, like you were saying,
Justice.
justice.
Mhm.
Right?
Who calls out idolatry? Who calls out idolatry?
The Deuteronomistic history is primarily concerned with idolatry. Right? And we do see some of the prophets who come from a priestly lineage who kind of focus on idolatry.
Yes.
But for the most part, what we see time and time again with the prophets is that morality is primary to cultic life, right? Is above it. Takes a higher. I don't know what I'm trying to say. This should be your primary concern. Is morality, right? And then you can participate in cultic life. Yeah.
And that's the prophets.
The prophets,
Is this
right?
on Google?
That focus on morality. Form of it.
Alright.
Okay. What concept allows the prophets to hold on to God's covenant promises and yet at the same time affirm divine justice? Right? God is going to punish you, but don't worry, God's just. Right? We can still say God is just, and that's why he's sending these punishments, but he's got to hold on to this covenant promise. Right? Yeah, there's a concept that we talked about. Right? Especially with Isaiah. Not really.
That he's going to go with them.
I could see that.
Yeah, I'm
We're gonna
not
kind of
understanding
go a little bit earlier than that, right? Think about Isaiah. Isaiah is saying God is going to send in this army, right? This army is a means of God's punishment, right? But these covenant promises are going to be held on to, right? Because God's not going to completely wipe you out.
Was that anything to do with the R word remnant?
Remnant.
the.
Good.
Oh,
You did.
Right? That idea of the remnant, right? There is this divine justice. You have been immoral. You have gone back on all your covenant promises, and so there's going to be this punishment, and yet there will be this remnant. Right? Exactly. Does that make sense? You guys remember that? How we
Yes.
talked about that idea? What's the term used to refer to the scattering of the Israelites among the nations that began with the Babylonian exile?
Oh, I know.
Scattering.
I know
No,
that.
I know it.
If I saw it, I would.
Me
Right here?
too. I know exactly. It's
Say that, hold on.
oh,
First,
I
the
know
scattering of the Israelites among the nations.
because they still use it. I know
Mhm.
what this word is.
Exile.
No, if you say it, I will know it. Tell me the first letter,
No,
please. I know what it is. If you just tell me the first letter.
it's not a test word.
If I saw it, I just think I would. I just don't.
Look through your notes.
I have my book.
Say it again out loud. I'll do that. The term you.
What's the term used to refer to the scattering of the Israelites among the nations?
That's not
That
syncretism.
I see on at the end.
It's not syncretism.
Let me say it a different way. What's the term used to refer to the dispersing of
Disperse, disperse, dysphoria,
No,
dysphoria, dysphoria,
Close enough. Diaspora.
Oh,
diaspora.
Right, the diaspora. Right, refers to the scattering of Israelites. Right. So the Israelites who are still not living in Israel right now are still kind of referred to as living in diaspora.
Hold on, hold that thought. I was writing that down. I'm sorry.
Yeah, if I'd seen that, I would know.
Cause
what
I
it
don't
was.
remember.
Being dispersed from the land, right there.
Right, being dispersed. That's a nice little
Away from the
thing.
temple.
Scattering, dispersed, diaspora. Right.
Scattering, dispersed.
Right. Way for you to remember that.
EIAS.
What's exogamy?
Oh, Lord.
Oh, that's mixing of people, marriages. Is that marriages?
Marrying who?
People out.
The,
To a foreign nation.
the foreigners, yeah.
Right. Marrying outside of your family group. Who brings up exogamy? Who speaks against exogamy?
The last one.
What's that, Jim?
Nehemiah.
Nehemiah. Exactly. Nehemiah speaks out against exogamy.
Wait a minute, move now, hold on.
Exactly.
This should already be in your notes.
It
You
is.
should
I
already
know,
have
it's
seen
wanna
it.
make sure it's in that again. I wanna make sure it's in that
Don't be
again.
like that, Miss Lee. This is a good review.
Yes.
A detailed vision of the end that is delivered by a divine being is the mark of what kind of genre?
Oh,
Yeah.
apocalyptic.
Apocalypse.
Bingo.
That's the one I was thinking.
Good.
Hold on.
Apocalyptic.
I don't have that.
That was Wednesday's class. We talked about apocalyptic literature being this detailed vision that's delivered by a divine being. Or is generally what marks the genre of apocalypse. Huh? What does the word Messiah mean, and how did it function in prophetic thought?
The anointed.
Anointed.
Good. It means anointed. Perfect. All right. Now let's think early on. Early on, what did the word Messiah refer to? If it means anointed,
Someone who is to be king.
good. So anybody who's a king.
Yes.
Anybody who is a king is anointed. They are, in a sense, Messiahed, right?
Mhm, right.
And then how does this idea start developing in prophetic thought?
It becomes like a savior almost, maybe, like someone that will turn.
Yeah. Anybody? Yeah.
So being God is with us, like later on or something.
What's that?
So that's what Emmanuel means. But Emmanuel is kind of, in a sense, if it's Hezekiah's, or if it is Hezekiah, and he's a king. So in a sense, he's a Messiah kind of figure.
So is that
I mean-
representation
I think it evolved because the prophets were anointing the kings at first, so they were Messiah, making them Messiah or whatever. And then, I can't remember what was prophetic thought.
It
We
would have been
talked about
wrong
that.
in prophetic thought
Oh,
because they didn't want the king, they wanted God to be the focus.
In
and not
prophetic
the
thought, they didn't think it was gonna be.
Some did, right? But
Right.
like, for example, you have other prophets, like Isaiah, who very much emphasized the Davidic covenant,
Okay.
right? So if you're emphasizing the Davidic covenant and you're looking forward to a Messiah, right?
Someone is gonna come and like save the Israelites. Or
That's what I-
free
yeah.
the people or
Deliver
I don't know,
them.
Deliver, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So like you guys said, it means anointed one. And it referred to any king. And then to the line of David in particular, right? So we have anybody who's a king is anointed. And now we have it being associated with David's lineage, right? And then as an eschatological hope, right? This Messiah figure will restore us, right? Will restore the people. Right. So Zerubbabel, for example, like those messianic hopes get placed on him. And then once Zerubbabel kind of drops out of the picture, that hope for a Messiah gets kind of placed on this eschatological hope. In the end, this messianic figure will restore Israel.
Is that like their? I mean, in like a Christian tradition, like the Messiah is like Jesus, but to them it's just someone like a king returning them to the promised land or whatever with their.
And I mean, like that's how the idea develops,
Okay.
right? So the idea develops like it starts out as just this idea of a king, right? But then it becomes very much associated with David's lineage, right? Because of the Davidic covenant, right? Israel understands that God has made a particular covenant with David and David's house. And so anybody who is this messianic figure, anybody who's going to be king, has to be from David's line, right? And because Zerubbabel kind of drops out of the scene, this idea of a Messiah in Israelite thought gets kind of thought of as this individual who in the end will restore Israel, right? Now, when Jesus comes along, for Christians, the thought is that he is the one who is doing that. He is restoring Israel, just not, and this is kind of why, Christianity went from being like a Jewish sect to its own thing,
Right.
is because of the division between people who thought, yes, this is the Messiah, the one we've been waiting for, inaugurating this end time, and restoring Israel, just not in the way everybody thought. And the Jews at the time who said, no, this isn't the Messiah. This isn't the restoration that we've hoped for.
Right.
Right? Because look, we're still under Roman rule.
So with like in like the development of like the whole Christian thing, and that's through that Messiah we get like heaven and blah blah blah. So
In a sense, we'll talk a little bit more about afterlife ideas.
That's what I was about to ask you. Like, where are the Jews going with that?
We'll get to that when we get to the writings. Yeah. Okay. What phrase is used by the prophets to refer to the eschaton? There's a nice little phrase when they're talking about the eschaton. That's the messenger speech, right? Thus says the Lord. Right, but there's a nice little phrase when we're talking about
Messenger form?
when they're referring. What's the eschaton?
That's the account of the end.
Mm-hmm. The eschaton is the end. Eschatology is like an account of the end. So if the eschaton is the end, there's a phrase that the prophets use to refer to the end. Remember? I'm just throwing out words now.
No.
The clue is that it's a phrase, not just a word. I'll say this, all of Israel thought it would be a day of their vindication, and the prophets generally turned it and said, no, it will be a day of your judgment. I'm going to have to give you guys this one. The day of the Lord. You guys remember that? When they talk about the day of the Lord, right? All of his, like, the predominant thought was the day of the Lord would be a day of Israel's reckoning, right? Israel will be justified and vindicated above all the nations, and all the other nations will be judged, right? And the prophet says, you don't get out of that judgment, right? That this will be a day of darkness for
I
you
remember
as
you
well.
saying that, but I don't remember it.
I don't have it in my notes.
Which prophet or prophets prophesied in the north during the Assyrian crisis? Just had it.
Amos and Hosea.
Good. Amos and Hosea. Good. Which prophets prophesied in the south during the Assyrian crisis?
Isaiah.
Jeremiah.
No, Isaiah.
Isaiah. Isaiah of Jerusalem, right?
Isaiah of Jerusalem.
Which prophets prophesied during the Babylonian crisis?
Jeremiah.
Good. Which prophet prophesied in exile?
Ezekiel.
Post-exile?
Nehemiah and Haggai.
Good. And there's another one up there.
Oh.
Yeah. It's Nehemiah and Haggai. Sorry. There's other prophets.
Oh,
This was from a previous
Okay.
class. Which prophet emphasized the royal ideology and hoping for a Messiah from the line of David to restore Israel? Is it going to be anybody from the north?
No.
Okay, good. Get rid of Amos and Hosea.
It's Isaiah.
Isaiah.
Yeah, I think Isaiah.
Good. Right? Think of that line about there will be, there's a lot in Isaiah that kind of talks about this idea of a Messiah. Right? The stump of Jesse. Right? That royal ideology is really strong in Isaiah. Right? And this is why, this is kind of the reason why Isaiah is one of the most quoted Old Testament books for Christians. It's because of all of this talk of the Messiah.
Anytime we write, do we need to write out Isaiah of Jerusalem, or can we accept it as Isaiah?
I'll accept Isaiah. I mean, if you say Isaiah of Jerusalem, I'll know you've been in the class. Yeah. Okay, which prophet railed against the royal ideology, claiming that the temple was no guarantor of divine protection? He railed against it. It's awful. This is pretty much a lie. This royal ideology that you can say, oh, just because we have this temple, everything's fine.
Jeremiah.
Exactly. Right? And we have that line, the temple, the temple, the temple. Remember, he's got
Yes.
that 3 repetition. And he's like, just because this temple is standing does not mean you're safe. Good. Which prophet caricatured Israel's cultic life? Or think about caricatures and how silly they look. Caricatured Israel's cultic life in order to emphasize that God was more concerned about morality. A lot of them did this, but we kind of really talked about this with one in particular.
And I remember when you said that too.
Which prophet?
Caricature the cultic life in order to emphasize God was more concerned about morality.
You saying which prophet was it?
Which prophet? There's one prophet that pretty much says all of your festivals and worship is empty because there's no justice.
That's not Jeremiah.
That's me.
It's Amos, good.
Oh, flip.
Cool.
Oh, I forgot that.
Nice. Good. Amos. Alright. Which prophet emphasized the royal ideology in hoping?
Well, we just had it.
It's the same one, sorry. Okay, here we go. Which prophet wanted to protect Israel's cultic and ethnic identity by prohibiting exogamy?
Oh, that was that Nehemiah?
Jeremiah.
Good. Yeah. Nehemiah especially. We see it most clearly in the books of Ezra and Nehemiah. What did Haggai emphasize? Haggai, Nehemiah, Ruth, or anybody, if you remember. So, because they didn't just talk about exogamy and not marrying outside. There's other really strong emphasis with Haggai and Nehemiah and Ezra as well.
He mostly talks about
Rebuilding the temple, right? Rebuilding that temple, that kind of protecting of Israel's ethnic identity, or their identity as the people of God through their ethnic identity by prohibiting exogamy, and their religious identity by rebuilding the temple, starting back cultic life in Jerusalem. Which prophet rejected the Deuteronomist view of history and divine justice with the idea of individual responsibility? Individual responsibility. Who really hits this? Says, no longer are the children going to suffer for the sins of the parents, but each one will feel the full weight of their own sins. Right? You're also not going to have this delayed punishment. Right? God's not going to punish somebody down the road for your sins. Right? And the same in the way that the Deuteronomist says that things happen. Right? Oh, it's because of this king's early sins that is the reason the kingdom fell. Ezekiel says no. Like there's no, you will suffer the sins that you're responsible for. How did the prophets help Israel adapt its beliefs to the kingdom's destruction? I think especially here about Isaiah and Jeremiah. Adapt its beliefs to the kingdom's destruction. Yeah.
Isn't that when, by telling them that it was their punishment, but about the remnant, that they would be restored or whatever God would do.
Yeah. Remnant's a big part of this. And we see this wrestling that Yahweh has not been defeated, right? But this is the punishment. This is the result of their actions. The covenant isn't broken. The people are just suffering covenant curses. You can definitely say this idea of a remnant kind of exemplifies that. Exemplifies the idea that the covenant is still intact. Yahweh is not defeated. They're just being punished. Right? So it's not that the gods of Assyria or the gods of Babylon have defeated Yahweh. Right? Remember, that's going to be kind of a possibility in some sense for these Israelites. Is this idea that these other gods have defeated Yahweh. But the prophets say, no, it's not that Yahweh's been defeated. Yahweh's still in charge. Okay. So it's the kind of pre-exilic period, right? How did the prophets help Israel adapt its belief in cultic life in the exile?
Okay, I think that's the one that told him
The hope of the restoration of David's life.
Good. So there's this hope of restoration, this future hope. What else?
they told him, okay, you're gonna be there a while, marry and set up shop.
The
and-
temple to come with them.
What's that?
Oh,
Didn't they
yeah.
make the temple to travel with them?
How so? Because they didn't actually take the stone.
Yeah.
It was within.
It was like
Carry
he
it
told us it was like a
within
tent or something that.
No, he said he was gonna write it in their hearts.
That was-
Right.
Good. So you got Jeremiah, right? The covenant in the heart.
Yeah.
What else? There's one other thing, especially from Ezekiel, that Ezekiel sees that's kind of related to the temple. We had a nice little Hebrew word up here.
Is that the
Kavoth.
yeah.
What's kavoth?
That is word for glory.
glory
Glory. Where does God's glory usually reside?
in the temple?
In the temple. What does Ezekiel see? What is in his vision? What happens to that kavod? What happens to that glory?
It's burning. Is it the God leaving the
Yeah, he sees this pillar of fire and smoke leaving the temple and heading east. If it's heading east. If it's heading east, it's heading with the exiles into exile, right? It's leaving with the exile. He sees the glory of God that resides in the temple, leaving the temple and moving eastward, right? And all the Israelites who are being taken into Babylon are moving eastward. So he's seeing that the glory of God is mobile, that it can go with the Israelites, that it's not confined to the temple, right? So God's presence is mobile, right? The moving glory, the moving kavod in Ezekiel. And, as you guys mentioned, the covenant in the heart in Jeremiah. And to hit the second part of this cultic life, right? We kind of missed that when we were discussing it. But now we're going to have that cultic life center on practices that didn't require a temple.
Oh yes, the circumcision.
Right,
and
circumcision, Sabbath, diet, right? Those kind of the laws that we saw in the Torah become incredibly important during this time period. Right? Because it's those laws and ways of operating as a community that now define that community, since they're not defined by that land. Right? Finally, how do the prophets help Israel adapt its beliefs and cultic life upon returning home?
They rebuilt the temple?
Good. Rebuilding the temple. Right? What along with that, rebuild the temple, what else would go along with the temple? Worship.
Hope of restoration, is that what he said?
Yeah, kind of. So keep on that whole restoration,
worship.
right?
Mhm.
So you got the worship, you got tithing, the priesthood, all of that's going to be emphasized. So that's the religious identity, right? And that's how that cultic life is going to be adapted. And then the exogamy, right? That ethnic identity. Right, so there's this emphasis on rebuilding the temple, the need for tithing, right? And what we didn't kind of talk about, because I was going to bring it up next, next time we met on Wednesday after the test, is there's this disappointment. And I guess I can talk about it now. It's okay if this doesn't make it on your test. But there's this disappointment in restoration, right? Because Zerubbabel's on the scene. It's like, hey, here's this messianic figure that we've all been waiting for. We're restored. God is going to vindicate us now. And then things just take forever, right? The temple doesn't get rebuilt to its former glory. It gets rebuilt and it's nice, but it's not as nice as it used to be. Or at least the people who are rebuilding it feel that way. It takes forever. There's kind of this internal divisions. Not all of Israel returns. So there's this huge disappointment. Zerubbabel, this messianic figure, totally disappears from the scene. And because of that, you get this apocalyptic vision. This apocalyptic perspective that says, oh, all these things that the prophets have been talking about, they weren't talking about a period within time, right? Within a timeline. They're talking about the time period at the end of the timeline. Right? So all those things that they've been hearing from the prophets about the Messiah and about Israel's restoration is not at one point in a timeline, but it's at the end of a timeline. And that's what we start to see with a lot of the prophets during the restoration. Right? During, Zechariah's, Nehemiah's, Haggai's time.